On Stranger Tides by Tim Powers, a work of historical fantasy which served as the inspiration for the fourth Pirates of the Caribbean film, which neither lived up to the heights of this book nor to those of the preceding films in the franchise, but I suppose that's another matter. Now, this was actually a reread for me. I first read On Stranger Tides about 10 or 11 years ago, but in that intervening time, my appreciation of it had kind of dulled. I had kind of forgotten just how much I like this book, and I do like this book a lot. It is a page turner in the best sense of the term. It is an immensely engrossing adventure yarn. It kept me hooked. I was turning those pages. It was really just a blast to read. You know, not every book needs to be some intensive philosophical study of whatever. Sometimes you just want to have fun when you read, right? And this book is fun to the nth degree. It is an immensely fun read, and I really, really liked it a lot. But also upon this reread, I was kind of confronted with some shortcomings to the story, which I can't recall if I noted those on my first time reading it way back when. So, you know, with time comes perspective. So perhaps I'm a little bit more advanced in my critique of literature now than I was when I read this book the first time. But I'm going to tell you all about it, the good and the bad. So, what is the story of On Stranger Tides? Now, if you've seen that fourth Pirates of the Caribbean film, which is uh, inspired by this but not based on it, don't think that the story of that movie is in any way a reflection of the story of this book. The only thing that that movie really has in common with this book is that they both feature Blackbeard and the Fountain of Youth. But other than that, they're totally different. It really is just inspiration, not actual like literal adaptation. But the story of On Stranger Tides takes place in the golden age of piracy. That is the early 1700s, and our principal character is one John Shandenak, a European one-time puppeteer who is sailing to Jamaica to settle some inheritance issues with a conniving uncle. And on board the ship, en route to his destination, he makes the acquaintance of one Beth Herwood, a a likable, attractive young English woman that he kind of becomes smitten with. But then their ship is waylaid by pirates who are also practitioners of Vodun, which I believe is another word for voodoo. I think that's the more common term for it. Anyway, magical pirates, you might say. And that's where the fantastical elements enter into this historical story. So anyway, the pirates take over the ship. They're betrayed. The other passengers of the ship are betrayed by Beth Herwood's father, who is a one-time Oxford professor turned sorcerer, who is in league with these pirates to accomplish some nefarious ends of his own. And in the course of the capture of the ship, John Shandenak injures one of the pirates and then is roped into joining their ranks himself and is rechristened as Jack Shandy, a name much more befitting a pirate. So John Shandenak, now Jack Shandy, sails with the pirates now under their flag. Uh, and they eventually have to rendezvous with Blackbeard on the Florida coast, where they're going to search out the fabled Fountain of Youth so that they can perform some more magic, reap some more benefits magically. And then Beth Herwood's father has got to use her for some devious ends to, in short, resurrect his dead wife using the body of his daughter. And so Jack Shandy has to rise to the occasion to fight off some nefarious pirates and also save the girl and, come out on top before sailing into the sunset. So that's the story of On Stranger Tides in a nutshell. Nothing like the Pirates of the Caribbean film, except for some shared elements. But yeah, so that's the story. Let's talk about the uh, qualities technically of that story. So the writing in this book is good. It's not going to win any awards. It's not like um, super elevated literary prose that critics fawn over, but it's not inept by any means. It is a more than competently well written book. It's just, it's not the most ornamental prose, but it's not badly done at all. It is a finely written book, not really shooting for artsy in tone, but it gets the job done, and it's not inept or clumsy. So I can't really commend it as being like the most breathtaking, gorgeous writing you're ever going to read. But it's fine. It works fine for what the book is. So no real complaints with the writing. Now, as for the characters, I think the characters mostly where it counts work. John Shandenak slash Jack Shandy is a likable character. He's also understandable. He has a sufficient backstory to let us kind of understand his psyche, and he's kind of torn between two worlds: the civilized uh, world of Europe and the wilder and also much more mystical world of the Caribbean, and the pirates as well, because he's kind of forced to join ranks with the pirates. And so he's placed in some compromising positions over the course of the story, and his character is pretty well done. I think we like him, we understand him. Not much to complain about there. The secondary characters do have levels of depth to them. Blackbeard is a pretty memorable character. He ultimately ends up being like the final boss, I guess you could say, the final antagonist of this story. And he is a pretty memorable presence. He is a very imposing figure in this story, as would, befit the kind of quintessential historical pirate. And also, Beth Herwood's father, also kind of a main antagonist. We do understand his motives as he wants to resurrect his dead wife, but he's also just evil as shit. So it works. Beth herself, which is Jack Shandy's love interest, is kind of thin. She's really just the damsel in distress. She doesn't do a whole lot in this story. But this one's for the boys, right? This one's for the boys. So um, if you're looking for strong female leads, you're not really going to get that here. But if you just want a rousing adventure story about, the classic tale of the guy trying to save the girl and save the day, this more than cuts it. So, it works well enough. It's not the deepest book I've ever read in terms of character, but it gets the job done well enough. Now on to the story, and this is where the shortcomings um, kind of jumped out at me, which I don't recall what they did when I read this book originally. But the story of this book is both really riveting, but it's also flawed. First of all, the setting of this book is captivating, to me at least, because I'm a sucker for pirates. If you didn't know that, I'm a sucker for pirates. That kind of setting of the Caribbean in the early 1700s. And what really struck me about reading On Stranger Tides this time is that this book really does have the same theme as those Pirates of the Caribbean films. In fact, I would not be surprised at all to learn that this book kind of like inspired the writers of those films, because they do share a common theme, and that is the shrinking world. The map is being filled in. The world is becoming more civilized and more boring, you might say. Not so much. There's not as much wildness anymore. Things are becoming more quantified, and the age of the pirate is kind of drawing to a close. The age of the rogue, the rogue outlaw is kind of drawing to a close as the world marches on in the relentless march of progress and whatnot. It has the same theme as those Pirates of the Caribbean films, uh, and I really respond to that well. I like that. This kind of contrast between the mundanity of old world Europe and the wildness and the mysticism of the Caribbean, where voodoo, or as it's called in the book, vodun, is practiced by not only the natives but also the pirates. And that's again where the fantastical elements come into play in the story, because like I said, this is a work of historical fantasy. It takes place in a real world setting, historically, but there's also magic and supernatural stuff happening. But it works really well because, like, the Caribbean, Jamaica, Haiti, like those countries have a very uh, very strong history of like voodoo and witchcraft and stuff. And it works its way into the story quite organically, I think, because the pirates are sailing all over the Caribbean, back and forth from Jamaica to Haiti to wherever else. So it's believable that they would have been exposed to this kind of practice. And so I think that the way that Powers works in the historical and the fantastical together is actually really well done. I like that. But the issues that I have with this book, that I had with it rereading it, is that the plot is not so deftly handled as it could have been. So when this book starts out, the plot is pretty tight. We have a character who is going to do this thing and then is sidetracked by the pirates and having to become a pirate, and then he has to save the girl and stuff. But as the story progresses, it becomes progressively unwieldy and kind of convoluted. And by the end, it felt like it got away from Powers. Like he kind of keeps throwing things in there, like it's like it starts out like we got to do this, and then it becomes, well, we got to do this first, well, first we got to do this, actually first we got to do this, and then we can do this and this. It's like he kind of like keeps throwing plot elements into this to where it really does become kind of unwieldy. And the way that some of the plot threads are resolved in the end feel kind of cheap, honestly. I think it could have been done better on a plot basis, because, like I said, it just kind of snowballs into something not quite as manageable as it perhaps should have been. But also, as much as I like the way that he weaves in the magic into the historical setting of this, the rules of that magic are never properly set up. Like it's never made clear exactly how the vodun or the voodoo or whatever works, like what the limits are, what you can do, what you can't do. And at times in the story, it feels like he's pulling it out of his ass. Like it really does. It feels like he's just kind of like winging it, just pulling stuff out of his ass, just like saying, "Well, what about this? Oh, but this. Oh, but we can't forget this." And it kind of just comes out of nowhere. And again, you're never made to really fully understand like what the nature of this power is, like how. I mean, it's kind of confused, and again, it feels kind of cheap at times. It gets kind of a little bit too convenient or inconvenient, perhaps at times. It it feels a little bit like pulling it out of his ass at times. But those criticisms aside, this book is still a fantastic read. Like I said at the start, this is a page turner of the highest order. It is just a captivating read. I mean, blazing through these pages because this story really does just suck you in, even though it is flawed, I think. It nonetheless has the power to captivate, and I freaking had a blast reading it. So my ultimate rating of On Stranger Tides by Tim Powers, I'm going to give the book a B plus. The writing's fine, the characters are mostly good enough, but the plot elements and some of the elements of like the more magical stuff don't always work as well as they could. I think. I do think that this book maybe uh, needed a little bit more kind of editing, especially in terms of the plot, but also just in kind of keeping things consistent with the things at play in the story, I think. But in spite of those criticisms, I still like this book. I mean, a whole hell of a lot. It's such a fun read. So yeah, B plus. It's still a great book. I thoroughly enjoyed reading this, or rereading this, I should say. So yeah, On Stranger Tides by Tim Powers. Have you read On Stranger Tides? If you have, let me know down in the comments what you thought about it, whether you have agreed or disagreed with anything I've said today. And if you haven't read On Stranger Tides, if you just want like something fun to read, just something to lose yourself in, some like the highest quality escapism, just some really good escapism, uh, I would recommend picking this book up. I think it is uh, absolutely suited to that kind of reading. It's just a blast to read. It really is. It's just so fun. And also let me know if you're what you thought about the Pirates of the Caribbean film, which is again inspired somewhat loosely by this book. Definitely not the best Pirates film, but still. And as always, if you have enjoyed anything you've seen or heard here today, remember to hit that like button and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. And until next time, peace.